So here's kind of what we know so far. The Pentagon says U.S. strikes put Iran's nuclear program back months, but the White House is saying that is not true. And they're citing Israeli intelligence, which reports the program was actually set back years. So there's kind of where that discrepancy falls. We are hearing it could be set back months or set back years, but Iran also saying their program was badly damaged and they will rebuild and that program will continue. They didn't really give a timetable on that, by the way. So in the wake of this leaked Pentagon report that you may have heard about, the Trump administration now saying it plans to limit the amount of classified information it's sharing with Congress. Meanwhile, that ceasefire between Israel and Iran is holding this morning. And Iran's supreme leader saying the country crushed Israel in this conflict. Joining us now with expert analysis is Wayne State University professor Saeed Khan. Mr. Khan, we appreciate your time as always. I know you were just listening to the press conference there, and I know you've been keeping up to date with everything going on in between Israel, Iran, and of course now the United States' involvement. I just want to get your reaction. What are you thinking in all of this as you're not only hearing the secretary's words there, but also what's happened over the last couple of days?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on and giving me the opportunity to provide an analysis of this. Starting with the Secretary's remarks, I think that this is a reflection of the indiscipline and the confusion that seems to be central to the Trump administration. The very idea that the Secretary of Defense decides to devote so much time to critique the adjectives that are being used for the strike that the United States conducted on three of Iran's nuclear facilities is mind-boggling. Nitpicking about words like damaged or destroyed or severely so, or it's been an enormous success is rather unprofessional and rather unprecedented. I thought it was quite telling that when President Trump came out initially to address the American public, after the strikes, joining him were the Vice President, the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of Defense, but not the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You would expect the highest ranking military official to have been there at least to show support. And the fact that the Trump administration has a difference of opinion where the White House is believing Israeli intelligence even over its own sources and methods, over the Department of National Intelligence and others, shows that there's an effort to try to cherry pick the narrative that makes the United States sound in the best light, makes the administration sound as though it's in the best light, without necessarily being accurate about what's going on. Now, tomorrow, if it is then demonstrated that Iran's actual nuclear stockpile of enriched uranium survived the three nuclear facilities being hit, whether it's damaged or destroyed, that's going to have to be something that the administration is then going to have to spin after the fact. So I think that this is something that for the American public is deeply problematic, as well as the president now saying that his administration is going to limit classified information being shared to Congress, which of course is a co-equal branch of government and deserves to have oversight over the executive branch. So a lot of confusion going on right now.
Yeah, and I want to actually speak to that confusion just a little bit because, you know, no matter what you hear from the reports of how badly the damage was, I think all the reports kind of agree there was at least some sort of damage here. But then there are conflicting reports from Iran literally just hours ago saying this morning that they have won over Israel in this latest conflict. And we actually have a quote from the Supreme Leader this morning saying, despite all the claims with all of this, the Zionist regime almost collapsed and was crushed under the blows of the Islamic Republic. This was just a quote from not long ago. You know, there's a lot of noise. Do you think at this point these leaders of each country, whether that be the United States, whether that be Israel, whether that be Iran, are they at this point just trying to save face with their public audience that is watching this closely, their people that live in their countries? What do you think?
Clearly, this is playing to our domestic audiences as well as more broadly to a world audience to show, look, we're still standing. we're successful. It's kind of like in a boxing match that when it goes 15 rounds, both boxers put their hands in the air to say, we won or claiming victory until the actual decision is made by the three-judge panel. The Iranians are going to make a claim that they're still left standing, that they were able to withstand a rather blistering fusillade of attacks, not only by Israel, but now, of course, also by the United States. Israel is going to claim, as it is with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that they won in this. But a lot of it has to do, again, with the ambiguity of what were the stated goals. Israel said that it wanted to take out Iran's nuclear facilities, but then it went beyond that, attacking military sites, intelligence sites, taking out Iranian state media and its building, going after civilians, assassinating physicists, nuclear scientists, professors, and even those negotiators who were in contact with the United States trying to chisel out a new nuclear deal. If the goalposts were being shifted by Israel to not only have a more totalistic attack, but also, if you recall, Prime Minister Netanyahu talking about regime change, well, then the Iranians are going to claim that the Israelis failed in that particular objective because the leadership is still in position. If the spin control is that we have severely or damaged or destroyed Iran's nuclear capability, then there are those who are going to claim victory. So again, it's not surprising that you have everybody trying to seize and control the narrative of this.
Okay, and for the context of our viewers here, we heard about the strikes, and I don't know that a lot of people were tuned in as much as they were until we realized that the United States was locked in on these strikes just a few days ago. So for some context for our viewers, can you talk about what the conflict is exactly between Iran and Israel, just in case anybody out there is wondering with a big question mark, why are we doing this? Why are we seeing this? Does this go back years? Does this just go back a few months? Can you just give us some, I guess, context for those people that may not know exactly how we got to where we're at?
Sure. Starting in 1979, after a revolution in Iran overthrew a dictator who had been in power for over 30 years and who had been a staunch American ally, Iran then developed a theocracy, if you will, a religiously led political system, and one that saw Israel as being a negative force within the region, in particularly because it saw Israel as expanding territory, particularly when it came to the occupation of Palestinian lands. Uh, Israel, particularly with Prime Minister Netanyahu, has waged a 30-year campaign trying to persuade the world that Iran poses an existential threat not only to Israel but to the globe itself, and particularly in the development of nuclear weapons. And going back as early as 1995, Netanyahu was trying to make the case that Iran was only a few months away from developing a nuclear bomb, something which still is not verified, including by American intelligence. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, had said as recently as March that Iran was still years away from developing a nuclear weapon. For some reason, it seems as though Netanyahu decided to take matters into his own hands now. There's a lot of speculation that he has been facing political corruption charges. He's on trial in Israel, and this allowed him to distract from his own political and personal challenges, as well as to take the focus away from what is being seen as not just a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, but increasingly, according to both world opinion and legal scholars, the conducting of a genocide against Gaza. So a lot of these have then amped up the temperature, if you will, when it comes to the tensions between Iran and Israel, which culminated in both the Israeli attacks nearly 2 weeks ago and more recently American involvement more directly.
Yeah, you speak about turning up the temperature, certainly overseas in the Middle East. What about reaction here in the United States? Maybe someone with family members living in the Middle East, maybe that be Iran, whether that be Israel. What would you say the sentiment is about those folks that are living here in the United States and perhaps watching what's going on over there?
Well, I think on a personal level, people will certainly be paying much more attention to this because it is personal. And we find that particularly members of the Jewish community focusing on what has been occurring in Israel, going all the way back to at least October the 7th, 2023, with Hamas attacks on Israel and the ongoing conflict with Gaza. Iran and its involvement with Israel has just added a different dimension to that. For Palestinians and other Arabs, and really, I would argue that it's a broader construct now of people seeing not only the destruction and devastation in Gaza, but looking at the Middle East as yet another manifestation of another conflict of a region which has almost become synonymous with a certain level of violence, a certain level of tension, and a certain level of threat. That is, of course, on the personal level, but then there are also issues, of course, that affect us when it comes to economics. This is a very heavily oil-rich area when it comes to production, and while the United States may not necessarily import much oil from the region anymore, we get most of our imported oil from Mexico and Canada. The price of oil is set on a world stage, and of course, if any kind of disruption occurs either to production or to distribution, that's going to be pain at the pump for Americans. And then lastly, of course, the issue that will America be drawn into a war that's not really of its own making or of its own business. And you see that those kinds of political arguments and debates are starting to happen more frequently and more robustly in America.
I have just a few seconds left, Professor Saeed Khan. We want to make sure that we get to this question here. Where do you expect this to go? I mean, obviously, this is an ever-changing situation, but where do you expect it to go here in the next few days or maybe in the future? Or is it too early to tell where this all could go?
I think that the most insightful barometer as to where this might go came from, interestingly enough, President Trump as he was leaving for the NATO Defense Summit in Europe just a few days ago, when he expressed his very open frustration, even profanity-laced frustration with both Iran and Israel. The rebuke that he had of Prime Minister Netanyahu immediately brought about the ceasefire after that because there were some breaches going on. That was something that we haven't seen from an American president be that public with his disapproval of an Israeli leader since probably Eisenhower in 1956 with the Suez Crisis. So the idea that this has really gotten under President Trump's skin might actually, in a very ironic way, bring about the kind of sustained cessation of hostilities that I would imagine everybody really wants, because even he has become frustrated by both the Iranians and the Israelis not heeding his call. And he is, after all, the president of the United States, and what he says does matter.
All right, Professor Saeed Khan with Wayne State University. We always appreciate your insight, especially when it comes to matters like this that are developing quite rapidly overseas. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.